Meeting of the Board of Directors for Third. This is our meeting where we are going to meet the candidates. I am at this point we don't have the press here. I'm going to thank the people who are attending. I'm going to thank the candidates, and I'm going to turn this over to our moderator, David Deering, and to his right-hand man, Bert Baum. So, David, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Rosemary, and thank you for inviting me back to moderate this most important event. And welcome to the audience as well. And our viewing audience, please, glad you've joined us. I'd like now to introduce to you the 4 candidates for 4 positions on the Third Board Mutual. I'd like to introduce to you Kush Bada, Steve Parsons.
Hello.
Craig Wayne, and Ralph Engdahl. And may I extend my personal thanks to you for being willing to serve as our mutual representatives. It's a good task and well served. Thank you. The format is as follows. We have questions that we would like to ask the audience and the candidates, but before we do that, we're going to offer the candidates an opportunity for an opening statement. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to respond, and we're going to begin with Kush.
Whoa. I don't get a chance to fudge over here and listen to them and say what they did?
Kush, you're number 1.
Okay, thank you. Well, as you said, my name is Kush Bada. I originally moved here from India in 1986. I have a degree in hotel management and worked most of my life before and after coming to America in hotels and restaurants and in hospitality, which means that I have considerable amount of experience working with people, and I love doing that. That's the best thing I do, talk to people and make them happy. Because if you come to my restaurant and you're not happy, you're not going to come back. Neither are you going to say good things about me or my restaurant. So that's the one thing I do best, is talk to people and make them feel happy. So when I first moved here to Laguna Woods, which was in 2016, I found that there were some disconnects with communication and customer service. So I thought instead of complaining and trying to fix things by just talking to people and complaining, it didn't work. So I decided to join the board. And that's what led me to join midway through a term about a year and 5 months ago, May of 2018, that would be correct, yes. So that's what led me to join the board. Initially, it was really hard for me to get around things because I had to learn everything as it came. There was no guidebook as such, like an operating manual. So it's like when you get a baby, you don't get an operating manual. You have to figure it out. So I've been doing quite well now. I am on the MNC committee. I chair that, and we're working on several projects. We have so many projects, it will be amazed to wrap your head around all of them and be able to get them done. But I have an amazing team led by Ernesto, who's our director of MNC, and he does a tremendous job. And with that, we do a lot of work around the community and get things done. One of the main things that I would like to work on is to create some income for our mutuals so that we don't have to tear our hair apart where to find the money. With that, I would say thank you. I'm done.
Well spoken, Kush. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for your willingness to serve.
Thank you.
like to reintroduce Steve Parsons. Steve, please share what you have to say.
Okay. Steve Parsons, First Vice President for Third Mutual. And my passion is really making things better any way we possibly can. And we have plenty of things here we can work with. In the past, we've accomplished many things. However, I see a significant need for updating our government documents, getting more resident involvement in decision-making, especially major decisions. I think sometimes people feel left out, or we may move too quickly without being able to gain their support and give them understanding and education. Also, in generating efficiency, savings efficiencies. I still think we have a long ways to go on that. We are looking at overhauling a few things that we're doing, which I think will help us in that area. And one thing I like about our board is everybody is business-minded. We constantly bounce things off of each other. We work together cohesively, and it's really a great group of people to be with. A little bit about my background in education. I have an AA degree in accounting, a BS degree in physical education from Warren Pacific University, and 48 semester hours in graduate school at the United States International University and Chapman Universities in organizational behavior and human resource management. My prior background was in the U.S. Air Force for 23 years. Some things I did there: I was an accounting and finance officer at Vandenberg Air Force Base, budget officer, a comptroller in Panama, air weapons director, squadron commander, and battle staff logistics officer. In the private sector, my experience includes medical billing for physical therapy, and accounting there also in many different clinics, public relations, and volunteer service. I just want to impress on everybody that our board is really moving forward. We look for the good of the whole. Nobody that I know of on the board has an agenda. We're just basically open to whatever comes, and we welcome input from the community. Recently, I started adding up the people I've talked to over the past 3 years, and I stopped at 200. And I really, really like to get out to hear what people have to say. Sometimes we find out we're doing things a different direction than the way we should be going. And that's where the public can help us. We don't have all the answers, but we move ahead as quickly as possible and as best as we can. So we thank you for your input, and don't stop it from coming. So let us know what you think, and we'll go from there. Thanks so much.
Thank you very, very much, Stephen. And again, personally, I'd like to thank you for serving. I'd like to now reintroduce you to Craig Wayne. Craig, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Craig Wayne, and as everybody knows, this is not a competition between the four of us for any positions, which of course is good. It also gave us an opportunity last night, or last afternoon actually, over at Garden Villas for the four of us to get together. And I can tell you that these three guys are terrific. There is no I in team, but I think we will be known as the A team because this group is great. I'm sorry for you other folks who can't join the A team. So I've lived in this community. My wife and I have lived in this community for 3 years. My father was an original buyer of one of the condos up inside Gate 14. So we've been here a lot since I'm 39 years old. I mean 50, you have to be 55 being here, 59 years old. I've been here a lot. My background is I have 45 years of service in the banking and investment arena. I was also a vice president of 2 bank systems. I was also the president of a homeowner association here in California and president of a homeowner association over in Hawaii, which were considerably different than here. So with my background and with the great team that I know we have here, I'm looking forward to serving.
Thank you so much. And again, not to be repetitive, but I would like to thank you for serving. Thank you very much, Greg. Let me say hello again to Ralph Engdahl. Ralph, please share your opening comments.
All right. Like you mentioned, my name is Ralph Engdahl. My wife and I have been resident here for about 6.5 years. Got involved in the computer club and the California club and played a little bit of par 3 golf, mostly par 3, occasionally. I was born and raised in the Midwest. I went to college at the University of Kansas and came out here after that, expecting to play with Rockets for about 9 months before I had to report on active duty. I got a commission when I graduated in the Army. And by January, they cut my orders back to 6 months active duty and 6.5 years, I think it was at that time, reserve duty. Actually, I served about, I think it was about 8 or 9 years on reserve, going to meetings every weekend and playing weekend warrior. I was on the TONE. I was an adjutant of a battalion. The adjutant officer. Personal life, I mentioned I was married, and second time, met my wife about probably 7 or 8 years ago, and between us we now have, while I raised 3 boys over in Westminster, we now have between us 7 children and 19 and a half grandchildren at the last count. We had a lot of help. You know, we had help from our kids. Professionally, I spent about 13 years in aerospace right out of school and finally got caught in a layoff. After that, I spent probably about 45 years thereabouts. I say thereabouts because I'll explain when I got out of it. In doing accident reconstruction and failure analysis work from a technical engineering standpoint. Basically, I spent my life trying to figure out why things happen that aren't supposed to. It usually involved accidents. Some of it was commercial stuff. Some of it was automotive. Some of it was industrial. I got a little bit familiar with things like OSHA, ADA, and some of the certain building code aspects. We did things like, we would always look for why did the accident happen. It may be technical, it may be a bad design, it may be something was misused, but our job was to find that out. We consulted with attorneys and insurance companies quite a bit, and it was a fun business while it lasted. I worked with Truesdale Laboratories initially, small lab up in LA, now down in Orange County. And then 3 of us left there and opened our own store. And shortly after that, I'm running over, okay. I'll cut it short. We opened our own store for a while and did the same thing. And when I quit, you don't quit, you just sort of fade away in that business. So I'll end with that. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Ralph. I certainly learned a lot from these well-qualified candidates. With many of them, I have some common interests and some common background. And I also learned that there's no guidebook. Gee. I also learned that there's going to be community involvement. That's so important. Communication is absolutely paramount in serving any community. And I'm also glad to hear that the 4 of you work together so well and have no agenda. And we're looking forward to the A team here. I think that's great. And again, thank you for serving. Next, we have prepared questions that have been prepared. And each candidate will have 2 minutes and an opportunity to respond. And Kush, you get to go first again, but you won't have to go first on the second question, okay? 2 minutes, and the first question is, what do you think are the most critical issues confronting Third Mutual, and how would you work to resolve them?
There are a few, but the most critical, according to me, are dry rot, which is prevalent in many buildings, waistline remediation, which we are working actively in trying to resolve that and accelerating that so that instead of doing it over 2 or 3 decades, we'll be trying to do it in a shorter period of time. It creates a lot of grief for the residents if something goes in the negative direction. And these are the main things. Apart from the third, the village-wide, we do have issues with our bus system, which is also in the process of getting resolved and consideration. And some of our infrastructure is getting old, like clubhouses and some buildings that need remediation. So these are just a few. I'm going to touch on just the highlight because no point in going through a laundry list this long. So just the top 3 or 4 is what, and landscape used to be an issue, which is on an upward swing. We are getting good feedback from our residents that they are liking what's going on, and that's where I will end for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Kush. And I'll repeat the question for Steve. What do you think are the most critical issues confronting Third Mutual, and how would you work to resolve them?
Okay, I'll start with number 2 first. I think there's a lot of confusion out there with people on how our budget runs. I think we need to do a lot of education with people on this. A lot of people don't understand how we set up the budget, why we set up the budget the way we do. And it makes for a lot of confusion in some ways. As you know, we have a lot of people that don't come to committee meetings, they don't come to board meetings and things like that. So they aren't able to look through the financials as we have presented in a paper format for them. So if that would happen, I think it would take away a lot of questions from people and they would feel more of a part of it. Number 2, though, I think something that surfaced of the last few months is, and I'll just put it out there, it's gossip. We have people that are passing on misinformation from one person to another without finding out the facts. It would really help if people, if they had a question, don't talk to somebody else, come in and talk to a board member or talk to a staff. And we can show them evidence of what we're doing, why we're doing it, things like that. But this still gets back to communication. I think we need to open up more. Sometimes maybe we need to slow down a little bit on what we're doing to let people catch up. But there's a multitude of different prongs to this, if you want to call it that. So we have to address each one a little differently, I think. But communication, I think, is really the key to the whole thing.
Thank you, Steve. And as we heard previously, this board is very wide open, working together. So please contact your board if you have a particular question. And now I will repeat the question for Craig. What do you think are the most critical issues confronting Third Mutual, and how would you work to resolve them?
Lack of quality control. We have no quality control. We have not had any quality control. I've spoken to management about this in the past, and yep, we're going to have quality control. And that's all I get, time and time again. Steve and Kush are right about these issues, but if we had quality control, someone following up on them, as we learned at our meeting last night, we don't, when we met with Garden Villas, that would remove a lot of our problems. We need to set up a quality control board.
Thank you very much, Craig. And I'll repeat this question for Ralph. Ralph, what do you think are the most critical issues confronting Third Board Mutual, and how would you work to resolve them?
The last 3 months or thereabouts, I've been serving on the VMS board. And a lot of that time has been spent on budgeting, balancing costs versus what we want to do, what we have to do. It's a real balancing act. And I think Steve's right. Not only is that important, but communication on how it all works together is important. One of the previous meetings that we've been in, it was pretty clear that people don't understand sometimes what we have to go through. But there are procedures, and I encourage people, along with the other candidates here, I encourage other people, residents of the community, to come to the meetings.
Thank you very much, Ralph. I would like to take this time to invite the audience, if you have any particular questions, we have prepared questions. And if you would like to ask the board members a question, please submit your questions to Cheryl. On the cards, please. Thank you. We're moving on to question number 2. And Chris, you do not have to start first this time. Steve has a chance to start first this time. Okay, question number 2, please. What skills, resources, and expertise do you have, and how would you use them on behalf of the third board?
Oh, that's pretty open-ended. My previous experience of the military helps me an awful lot, in that I was a supervisor and I was a treasury agent. So I have some skills in accounting, working with people especially. Communication was always a big thing. And I think all those come to bear with being open, being honest, soliciting people's comments, and actually really sitting down with them. I've had 2 cases recently where the individuals were, they felt like they weren't being heard. And so I went out on site with them for what they wanted to do and looked at it and I said, oh, now I understand what you're talking about. And that really meant a lot to them. And I think we need to do that more and more and try to get to know what the real problems are with people that they're having and help them solve it from that end. There are some other things that we're looking at down the road that could help in membership here and help people that have fixed incomes. We're looking at a couple possibilities in that area to help them out, and we'll see how that works. But there's so many things here that you can work on that sooner or later they culminate together and they make up a big package. But those are some things that I see and how I plan on working on these things.
Thank you, Steve. And I'll repeat question number 2 for Craig. What skills, resources, and expertise do you have, and how would you use those on behalf of the third board?
Thank you. I have vast experience in the financial services industry. I was vice president of a bank here in California. I was vice president of a bank in Hawaii. So I am used to dealing with people on a very large scale. The bank in Hawaii was the largest bank in Hawaii. That was before the financial crisis. Now they're the second largest. Over in Hawaii, the bank had no investment program when I showed up. So I had to institute the program for them. Nobody there had the experience. I did. I had the licenses, the General Securities Principal license, which was required, and that enabled me to set up that system for them. As far as working with the HOA, here, one of my clients was a wholesale nursery, and we needed some plants, trees, at that location. So talking to him, we managed to get those trees and plants at wholesale. So that was a resource. Over in Hawaii, I was also the head of the architectural committee of one. Yes. And I didn't like the way things were being built over there. Well, one of my clients was the architect who drew up the plans for the community. So I went to him and said, okay, we want to hire you. We don't want to do this work. I don't have the ability to do this work. We want to hire an expert to review all the plans that anyone comes up with when they want to add solar, they want to add a room, et cetera. And he took the job, and that was another resource that I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. And let me repeat question number 2 for Ralph. Question number 2. What skills, resources, and expertise do you have, and how would you use them on behalf of the third board?
A lot of my background, of course, as I mentioned, was technical, but we always had to communicate things, whatever the results of our investigation was. sometimes that meant telling a client that he didn't have a case. And our clients, being attorneys, don't like to hear that, particularly plaintiff attorneys. But it's a communication, it's a matter of how you get the point across. Other than that, I'd like to think that some of my concerns, which have developed very much along the lines of safety, might also be something that applies and would be useful to the community as a whole.
Thank you, Ralph. And now, question number two for panelist number one. Kush, what skills, resources, and expertise do you have, and how would you use them to benefit Third Board?
Like I had mentioned earlier, that I like to work with people. I am honest, hardworking, and I would say resourceful, and I would come up with solutions that would help resolve issues. Since I have worked in operations, that means on the floor with people, I like to resolve things fast and on the spot. So it would be tough for me to do that in some situations because we have to go through resolutions and make things happen. So, but still, I would be resilient enough to follow up and take this bull by the horn and fix it so that we can solve issues. And we have done that. We've completed many different projects so far that were necessary because I can give you one example. We now, before the end of this year, we'll have new cul-de-sac signs, which we didn't have in the past. They are modern, they are big, they're reflective, so people can see them in the dark. And we took that up last year, and by the end of this year, they'll get done. Also, we are working on the street lights, and we did one pilot, and we're going to do the second pilot in a couple months and get that going. So what I mean is I like to get things done, and I'm right behind it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kush. Pardon the sidebar here, but thank you very much for the cul-de-sac signs. A GPS will not direct anyone who would like to come visit my wife and me, so I'm very grateful for the cul-de-sac signs. Now they can find us. Thank you. Question number three, we're going to start with Craig this time. Okay, question number three is, what does due diligence mean to you?
That's the simplest question. That's doing what's right when nobody's watching. It's that simple. You have to do the right thing for everybody, not thinking of yourself, but for everybody who's involved.
Short and sweet, thank you very much. Do I need to repeat the question, Ralph, or do we? I'm sure you know what due diligence is.
I think I've got an answer for you. Due diligence, I think, involves, among other things, this will be short and sweet too, considering as many unplanned circumstances or unplanned events as you possibly can when you try to do something.
There's always the surprise, isn't there?
That's right.
And now I will direct question number three to Kush. Kush, if you would please share your definition of due diligence and what it means to you.
Well, I don't have the dictionary definition for it, but I would say that I would concur with what Ralph and Craig both said. Do the right thing, get it done correctly, and do what needs to be done at the moment. I don't have the textbook description for that.
Oh, we don't need a textbook definition
So
or
I
a
just got-
dictionary definition. And I'm glad to see that so far we're all in agreement. Steve?
Yes. Okay, in addition to what the folks have said here, I think you have to research out the possibilities. First, define what the problem is. Research out the possibilities and try not to slant anything in a certain direction, but really look for the facts. Once you get that, come back and formulate a plan and then go with it.
Thank you. Question number 4, we are going to begin this time with Ralph. Question number 4 is, what is meant by fiduciary responsibilities and how are Third Mutual board members expected to fulfill them?
Well, that, of course, relates to the financial part of it, I think mainly. And we have a lot of people here in the community, like you mentioned earlier, with fixed income. Unfortunately, expenses don't stay fixed. So it's a big balancing act on how we handle that. And I think that is what falls under fiduciary responsibility. Not spending money that should not be spent, but spending money that should be and needs to be spent.
Thank you. Kush?
Like I said, I'm going to fail miserably on this one. Fiduciary responsibility means that we need to be responsible for the trust that our residents have put in us to take care of our assets and our monetary assets as well as the physical assets, and not squander it and use it in a responsible manner and take care of it. I suppose that's probably where I would stand on that. Do the right thing.
Thank you, Kush. Steve?
Okay, for me, I have to keep going back to the actual definition, or at least one definition that I use. I'll just read it to you and make some comments. Fiduciary duty of loyalty. The universal rule of directors and officers of a corporation is that they occupy a fiduciary position and, as such, owe a duty of loyalty to the corporation. This duty is to act only in the best interest of the corporation and its collective shareholders. So that's everybody that owns within our CID here. It goes a little bit farther, I think, than that, and I consider stewardship being a big part of this. You're overseeing, you're managing, you're helping move forward and things like that. Now, how do we do that? There are things that guide you, okay? We have the Davis-Sterling Act. We have federal laws. We have state laws. Also, our corporate attorney, okay? So we can go to them for advice on that, but still, like they said in World War II, the buck stops here, okay? We have to make a decision and move on with it, but in the best interest of stewardship, I believe.
Thank you, Steve. And now we will ask our former bank vice president his notion of fiduciary responsibility. Craig?
Yes, that's a good lead into that, yes. A lot of banks have not exhibited fiduciary responsibility. That's why we had the financial crisis we had. That's why we had liar loans going into the makeup of the products that were being sold. They were selling mortgages that had been packaged together and telling the people that these were perfectly safe. So there's a good example of bad fiduciary responsibility. So the right answer for fiduciary responsibility is to be making sure that the money is being spent in the manner it should be spent, and that the public is being apprised of what it really is being spent for. In an example here, I think there have been instances in the past where some people have been recommending things that I think are not at all appropriate. I don't think you want to spend $12 million on Clubhouse 3 when we have so many other things that Cush has been working on that really need the money. That's another example of fiduciary responsibility.
Thank you. It sounds as though to me that the residents simply need to pay attention to what's being spent, and they simply need to ask the board if they have questions about financial matters. Thank you. Cush, we're back to you for question number 5. How could you, as a third board member, influence the decisions of GRF?
That's a tough question. I suppose what I could say to that is by not explaining, but coordinating and cooperating with the different board members of the GRF and persuading them on our thoughts, why we want to do certain things, and what are the advantages and what would be the pitfalls if they would not do the things that we are recommending, which would be very important that we do that in a cooperative and liaising with all of them together, one person at a time.
Thank you. The question now goes to Steve. How could you, as a third board member, influence the decisions of Golden Rain Foundation?
Okay. All of us serve on various committees, and some of them are GRF committees. You have an opportunity there to bring forward your concerns if it's applicable to that committee. If it's not applicable to that committee, we have other representatives that serve on appropriate committees and panels or task forces that you can give your input to, and they can voice it on your behalf. Another way you can do it is attend meetings as a general member and come forward to speak on these topics. So you do have an avenue of doing this, and so I'll just basically leave it at that, but you do have an opportunity to speak.
Thank you. I keep hearing that theme over and over again. And the question goes to you now, Craig, third board member, influence the decisions of Golden Rain Foundation.
I think earlier communication was mentioned, and that certainly is what is required. The board, third board, needs to be communicating with GRF what we believe their needs are. And in some cases, they may not agree with us. So we need to make our case, they need to make their case, so an intelligent decision is arrived at that time.
Thank you. And Ralph, how about you, your influence on Golden Rain Foundation?
I think certainly communication is the big item, but let me break it down to a couple of things. One would be listening, and assuming that we have, on the third, have properly evaluated something to begin with, there's bound to be a certain amount of salesmanship involved to get it across.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And we're at our last question now, and we will begin with Steve. Steve, how can we improve third board residents and get ready for this, communication?
Okay, can you clarify that a little more?
Yeah, very simply, how do we as board members, how do we let the members of third board, the residents of third board, how do we communicate with them in the best fashion? And it's a two-way street for me.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah, for me too. We ask people to come to our meetings where we can explain things. Sometimes they're able to find out our logic approach to things. Committee meetings are so important, and a lot of people don't avail themselves of that. And almost all of them that I know of are open. So you're welcome to come in, and they have an opportunity to speak to the committee at the same time. We print a lot of publications. And in fact, I think we're about to the point where we can't afford to do any more. We have, as I understand it, public affairs, when I first got here, used to be 2 people or 1.5. Now we're up to 4, okay? And the amount of money we're putting into brochures, communications, electronic communications, going out and talking to them, it just staggers me when I think about all the effort that's put into this. And that comes to a point where you can't do that anymore. You have to be on the governance side. You have to continue moving forward with important topics. But like you say, there's 2 sides. And I think one side has not really been used very much, with the exception of a few individuals. And I could name a few of them. And that's where residents have the responsibility to be part of this community. We're a CID. And with that, we have to exercise our own responsibility to find out what's going on and to move forward with that. A lot of people are afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to ask. As I have been told in the past, there's no foolish question. So come forward, but come forward with your own. Don't pass it to somebody else. Come and avail yourself of the information and the resources that are available.
Thank you very much, Steve. Well spoken. Craig?
One of the situations we have is we have a lot of senior citizens. And it's more difficult for us to communicate with them on any level. Some of them may or may not have email. Some of them may or may not have computers. And that has been an issue when it has come to our travel, on how do some of these people access travel. They can't pick up their cell phone, or they don't have a cell phone, or their regular phone, and communicate that they need transportation. So that is a difficult question. Those people are not likely to come to these meetings of the committees, et cetera. So how we get to them, I don't know. But it's our job to try, and the publications that we send out, I can tell you right now, they aren't necessarily read. So I don't know how you get beyond that point.
Thank you, Craig. Ralph?
I think communication, again, is the big answer, but one of the aspects of it that occurred to me while we've been talking here, not that I disagree with anything that's been said, but one of the things we can do is get out into the community. Join clubs, get involved in the clubs, get feedback from people in the clubs, just conversation over dinner or something like that, if it happens to be a dinner club. Pick up a lot of things that way. And I would like to reemphasize to the members of the community, hey, come to these meetings. You'll learn a lot, and they're kind of interesting.
Thank you very much, Ralph. And the final question and the final responder will be Kush. Thank you.
And your question was, how do we improve communication in the community?
Well spoken, yes.
Okay. So like I've always said, we need to improve communication. And so far, since I've joined the board, not that I should take credit for it, but our communication department has done a stellar job of creating all kinds of emails, newsletters, and things in print and email. The big thing, like Ralph just said, was my thought too, is to mingle with the different clubs or invite the club presidents to certain key initiatives that we have so that they can take the message back to their community. We also find a growing Asian community that don't speak much of the English language, and we do have a communication barrier. And I do attend one of the club meetings, which is the ACC. What does that stand for? Do you remember?
Association of Condos and
Correct, Association for Condos and Co-ops, where they have a large number of club presidents from the different communities present, and we are able to share ideas and thoughts about what they are thinking and what the correct answers are for that. So we need to do more of that, and I would suggest to my fellow board members to be a part of it and do that more efficiently or effectively. And we've done a lot of things, and everything that my buddies over here have suggested are ideas that are good for communication.
Thank you very much. And thank all of you. Tough questions, easy questions, but all great answers. We certainly thank you very, very much for your responses. I'd now like to turn the monitorship over to Bert Baum, my right-hand man, as I was told, who is going to deal with questions from the audience. Bert?
Thank you. Can you hear me? You did a really impressive job. We only have 2 questions. So you've answered most of them, I guess. Okay, the first question, and then you'll have the same amount of time, maximum time of 2 minutes each, is if elected to the board, what would you do first? Let's start with Ralph. Let's go this way.
You want me to start?
Yeah.
First thing I
We
do is
want
listen.
what you would do first. The
What
first
would I
thing
do
you don't
first?
answer the question, so the second thing.
First thing I think I do is listen. I listen to the people. And I mentioned getting out and listening in the community and whatever they say. I'm not encouraging the people to come to us directly with a question out in the community, but we can pick up things. I've been involved in a couple of clubs. Probably should get involved in more, but run out of time. We've got all these grandkids I got to watch too. So, but I think that's a big thing, just getting involved and listening.
Okay. Thank you. Why don't we go down the line? Craig,
Okay,
what would you do first?
there is a reason we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we will listen twice as much as we will talk. And at the Garden Villas meetings, we learned a lot, did we not? Yeah, we listened for about an hour and a half on issues that they had, and they sent a list home with us, as a matter of fact. And by listening to these people, then we have better ideas. And Steve specifically said, okay, these are a lot of great ideas. We're talking about a lot of money here. Now, we want you to take that list and prioritize it. Tell us which on that list you think is the most important, so that we will look at that one first. That's what we do.
Okay, thank you, Craig. Steve, what would you do first?
Show up at a meeting. No, I think what they're saying is correct, especially a lot about listening. But if you notice the makeup of our board, we have a lot of new people. And we need to get together, solidify what we're going to be doing, who's going to serve on what committees, things like that. But we also need to do training. And for our new board members of the past, they've been assigned to certain things, but we need to continue our training into other areas. To this end, that our current president and our director of communications have come together with some other folks and put together a training manual. And it'll be done in the form of modules with different department heads coming in and actually training us with hands-on documents, so we get to see what they go through. And based on that, I hope that we can launch out into more strategic planning, not only for us, but in concert with the other 2 boards, and move forward on commonality of things.
Thank you, Steve. Kush,
Yes, sir.
last but not least, what are you going to do first?
If I had asked this question to my son, he would say, have a party. But I cannot say we're going to have a party, but we should have what Craig says, listen to people, and also Ralph. Continue doing what we do best. Talk to people, listen to them, and act on our current initiatives that we have and fulfill them in a timely manner. That's what I would do.
Thank you very much, Kush. Okay, second question. You've all talked about teamwork. How would you define it? Let's start with Steve. We'll go this way.
Okay. Teamwork. My whole entire adult life has been centered around that very topic. In all the jobs I've had, I have never been able to have all the resources I needed. I've never been able to replace people. We've always made do with who we have. And to that end, when you take away somebody having a hidden agenda or something you want to bring forward and you look for the good of the community, you can really put your heads together and say, what is the best solution for this problem? And working with each other, and like I like to say, let's get outside the box. Let's think about things differently. And by doing that and sharing our information, you might find out that something doesn't work now, but you'll find out that it'll work down the road. And that's why I like strategic planning. But I think on our board especially, we have great people who respect each other. We come from all different backgrounds. And it's really neat to see somebody hug somebody up in the room. You know, and say, hey, you know, I know you're going through something. How can I help you? And we do. We band together. And I would like to thank the members of the board in the past, Bert, James Tung, and some of the other folks for really helping me out, because on this board, they actually taught me how teamwork works. So thank you so much for doing that.
Well, thank you. Ralph, could you please, I'm sorry, Craig, could you please define teamwork?
It comes back to communication. When the members of the team communicate with each other, we have better teamwork. I can give you an example. Lynn and John, I've seen them work together, and they were working outside of the box, meeting with me, for example, on an issue. It wasn't a whole group of people. They went out of their way as a team to see that we had things done. That's the communication between the individuals, like those two.
Okay, thank you. Ralph?
I think the best example of teamwork, and that's an easy way to explain it, is by an example. I don't know how many of you watched the girls' soccer playoffs. Things like politics, little petty things went aside. They were on one team out there. I forget the gal's name that did most of the scoring. She couldn't have done it without a team behind her. So teamwork is working together for the common cause. It's the best way I could put it.
Okay, thank you. Kush?
My entire professional life has been teamwork. Working a restaurant and having a successful one is nothing but teamwork. Right from the top to the bottom, everybody is part of one team. And that's the one which I call the success team. So we work together in our board the same way. We are one team, and one thought is to do the right thing and fix it so that we make our residents and employees both happy and successful.
Thank you. Well, I'll turn it back to David.
Thank you, Bert. We are going to conclude with a closing statement from each of the candidates. Again, you will have 2 minutes to do that, and then we'll have some closing remarks and our adjournment. This time, I would like to begin the closing remarks from the candidates with Craig.
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, there is no competition here. We're already a team. And the only thing I can say is winners make it happen and losers let it happen. And we're all winners here. That's all I have to say.
Ralph.
I can't say I have a specific problem that I want to go out and solve right now. I'm sure that'll come up. But meanwhile, working together, helping to maintain the community that we have. And I think working on communication, as we talked about, was really good. I'd like to consider personally that my experience and orientation towards safety might come in handy in looking at some of the things that we want to do or should do, realizing that we're all getting older. It takes me longer to get up out of a chair than it used to. We react slower. We don't see things maybe we ought to see. So there's a certain awareness for the sake of most of our residents that a lot of times the rest of the world tends to overlook. But those are things we need to be aware of. I look forward to working with this group, the entire third, as well as the other mutuals. And I thank you for the opportunity.
Kush.
Yes, David. As we all have been talking about, and especially well said by Craig, that we're not here to compete against each other since this is a 4 for 4. But I'm here to take care of the immediate issues that show up and some of the long range things to facilitate that to happen. I've been here in the woods for about, or I should say the village, not in the woods, for just close to 3 years. And being on the board for this short period of a year and a little more, I have learned a lot more than I would have if I hadn't been on the board. So, as my closing statement, I would encourage all the people who are sitting on the fence and thinking about whether they should run for the board or not. I strongly recommend that they should participate even now as advisors and be involved, because all ideas are good, and that would help us function better, and we would learn something new from other people's new experience or experiences that we don't know about. So in the big picture, I'm going to do what I do all the time, is resolve issues and help people. That's how I would feel.
Thank you. Steve, you get the last word.
Word.
Excuse me, the last words.
Oh, okay. There's some topics that I think that we need to work on, and they're being presented to us already. We may just not be realizing it. One is, how can we stabilize assessments? And this goes between all boards. How can we work together to balance out the needs of the whole community while still moving forward? Is there a way to keep assessments even for a little while, or even flat? Number two, updating our governing documents. Our documents are way out of date and they need to be updated. Number three, more resident involvement in major decision-making. We need input from the field, so to speak. There are major topics we need to have come forward and decide our course. Once decided, these provisions need to be incorporated into our governing documents if applicable. Number four, generating efficiency savings, working with staff through cost control measures and quality analysis. Number five, and I mentioned this before, I'll throw it out again, rumor control methods. How do we curb this idea of passing rumors back and forth? I'll use an example of our past budget. People were going crazy saying that we wanted $32 a month per manor, and that was only the opening salvo, okay? We move forward from there. We constantly refine throughout the budget process. That's why it takes us approximately 5 months to do it. And when you get to the end, what are we doing? We're like at $15 per manor per month, okay? And even with that, we've got to sit and figure out how best to use that money and where it needs to be apportioned out. So these are things that our board, I think, needs to work on, as well as with other boards. And I want everybody to realize that our board is constantly moving forward. It's not sitting still. So if you want to try to keep up with us, great. We'll make a spot for you on the board. But keep those suggestions coming in.
Thank you very much, Steve. And thank you, gentlemen, so, so much. I have some information to share with the audience in the House and the audience at home. You still need to vote. It is very, very important that you vote. It looks as though with 4 vacancies and 4 candidates, we will have the A team serving Third Mutual. But please, please, please vote. And to further emphasize the opportunity to vote, I'm going to turn it back over to Bert.
I have to second what David just said, And there's some very practical reasons why we want everyone to vote. And that is simply, if we do not get a quorum of eligible voters, and that would be 15% of the community, which is not a large number. If in fact that doesn't happen, then we have to have the election again. And we're all talking about expenses and money. That costs money to run an election. It's not really very cheap because you have to follow certain very rigid procedures to do that. So we're asking everyone to vote. And what happens is you will get the ballot in the mail. Many people don't even realize that the ballot is mailed to them, and they think it's an ad and they throw it out. Well, if you see anything from the mutual coming to you in a nice envelope, it's probably a ballot, so please open it up. They're gonna be mailed August 26th. That's on a Monday, not to next Monday. And you have a month to vote. It has to be returned by September 25th, a Wednesday, and they have to receive it by 5 p.m. Now, you have a month, and what happens is people lay it aside and then they forget about it. So what we would suggest is, when you get the ballot, and there's not a big question in this situation, please fill it out and return it immediately. And I don't even think there's any postage on it. I'm not sure about that. And then the votes will be tabulated, and this has to be done with an outside consultant. And it will be done right here in the boardroom on September 27th at 9 a.m. And this is an open meeting that anyone is free to attend to make sure that everything is on the up and up. And you'll find out firsthand who the winners are, okay? But we seem to know who the winners are, and I want to congratulate you gentlemen for running. I think you're all winners. Now, following that election or the tabulation, there will be an annual meeting, and that will be held here in the boardroom at 9:30 a.m. on October 3rd. So everyone is free to attend there. And what happens at the annual meeting is that the new board members then take their seats, and then the board elects officers for at least the coming year. So we ask everyone in the community, certainly the people living in Third, to follow this procedure and to participate as much as we can. And again, I want to thank you all for volunteering to run and giving up your time. David.
Thank you, Bert. One or two closing remarks, please. I am thoroughly, after listening to Kush and Steve and Craig and Ralph, thoroughly optimistic about the future of Third Mutual. It seems to me that we have a living, breathing entity in this community that we want to preserve, and I see the hands of each one of these gentlemen reaching out to the community. And I would invite the community to extend a hand back to these courageous volunteers serving Third. And at this time, I believe we have heard all the information that we need to hear. Please, please, please vote. It is absolutely essential that we have a quorum. Thank you very much for attending our audience, and thank you all at home for listening. Have a great day.